Poor News Network. And I am the Black Crippled. Who's this?
Yeah, we PNN, not CNN, people. That's the Poor People's Revolutionary News Network, where ain't nobody owns us. And yeah, anti-social workers and case manglers call me crazy, lazy, dumb, and a bum, because my knowledge don't come from the institution.
So, you know what's up.
Yeah.
It's called the Gentrification Report. Another name offline, but you get the drift.
Yeah, let's just say that F has another meaning. Well, I get calls like I always do. I shout out to our brother Charles Pitts on the other side of the bay of the occupied Lashon Ohlone territory, who thinks that a certain non-profiteer needs to be fired. I feel you, bruh. But this week, and that's a part of when you talk about gentrification, you got to talk about the broad spectrum, right? How does tenant rights relate to unhoused people's rights? Well, guess what? We used to be tenants. There's a thought, right? And it's only the philanthropists that change and separate and splinter our movements. But later on in the show, we'll be talking about a powerful action happened today. But as we always do, we talk about some hard lawyering facts. Because, yeah, I'm a jailhouse lawyer outside of jail without a degree. And I do my best to help you see within these kangaroo courts. So I just want to talk about one case particularly today because this keeps coming up. Our beautiful sister Viv and her family, so glad that you were rehoused. Shout out to Vivi T, powerful poet, Poor Magazine, who faced what we would call another form of economic genocide. The way that our poor people housing is usually code for uninhabitable housing, which now you know people are paying up to $1,500 a month for poor people housing, right? That's working class housing right now, if you could scrape together those crumbs. But that said, Vivi T's situation is very similar to two other families that I got this week. So in her case, she dealt with essentially fungi poisoning or mold poisoning, which sadly around the Bay is actually an epidemic. I want to be very, very clear as a fellow, not only poverty scholar, eviction scholar, houseless scholar, a mold survivor who sits here today in front of you, really barely having lived through that. That if mold is in your living environment, you need to get out of that environment. Like, not try to figure out how to stay there, which all us poor people do, because yeah, I guess it's better than the street, it's better than the tent. I've been there, done that. Well, the one thing about sleeping outside, sleeping in the tent, sleeping without rent, is at least it's only the elements that you're dealing with, not a fungi that literally can kill you. And so, in the case of another family who called me this week, it was a mama with a young baby, and she was afraid because she literally, had no money, and she rented this room. It was an SRO, and it was only $600 a month, and that was all she could afford with the, 2 underpaid jobs she has, and a little bit of welfare crumbs, and trying to take care of her child as well, with family helping, and then child care over cost. So she didn't want to leave, but the problem was her child was getting a skin infection, which is one of the rarely talked about manifestations of mold poisoning. They usually only talk about the cough and the upper respiratory, but I will tell you as a survivor that for me it was a skin infection. I wanted to literally itch my scalp off. Alright, and I don't know how I lived through that, but I will tell you that it actually, just thinking about it right now, terrorizes me. I mean, seriously. To actually want to scratch your own skin off, and not ever be able to figure out what it is. And these doctors lie about mold poisoning because, it's sort of like a hush situation because the scam lords run everything. So it's like it's not an illness or something. You know, it's really weird how that goes down. But anyway, all that to say, her baby, who's only 6 months old, has a skin infection, and it's appearing as a rash. She's done everything else. She can't figure out what it was. And this week she started to scratch and realized that she was getting the same skin infection he was having. She didn't know what it was. Finally, a friend of hers walked into the room and said, "Wait a minute, you have black mold all over these walls." And she didn't even realize it, right? A lot of us live with that. It's a silent killer. We don't know that that's, I mean, it doesn't come out and say something, "Hey, I'm mold," right? And it doesn't even necessarily present as an obvious thing. Unless you have a sensitive nose, you don't even necessarily smell it. It sometimes doesn't even smell, you know, really obvious, right? But luckily for her, she had a friend who came in, and it was very apparent to the eye that in every corner, and that's how you kind of tell, there's usually spots that, albeit small, that happen at the place where condensation is happening behind your walls. So it's a very real thing. So sometimes all you see is little spots. They can be discoloration of like a more of a vanilla colored white, or they can actually be a brown, blue, or black color. And sadly, you can only have them maybe on one wall, and that can be enough to cause a very serious reaction. Fungi, you would not believe, as I learned from our sister Jasmine, our biology teacher at Decolonize Academy, fungi is actually an extremely powerful thing. It actually can attach airborne to skin, to other microbes, to, you know, the organism that is a human, and then it gets inside your body and it actually colonizes your DNA. Is that some sci-fi horror-ish or what? Yeah, well, it's real. And this is what's an epidemic among poor people in poor people housing all across America and arguably across the U.S., I mean across Mama Earth, because fungi is getting stronger as Mama Earth goes through more and more changes. So anyway, in her situation, she had nowhere to go. So she, you know, contacted the owner by phone. Of course, the owner said, "There's no mold in your place." Then she didn't know what to do. "What do you do next?" I said, "Well, you call the city. Sometimes there's mold abatement, although in Oakland there's no longer any funding for mold abatement, so there's not really. You can call DBI, and they might send somebody." DBI, Department of Building Improvement. It's a city department. You have to, the loudest voice catches the worm, or whatever that saying is. A page out of Mama D's book. If you're not getting somebody who's telling you yes, then you haven't reached the right person. My mama would say, the right person is the one who tells me yes. But that takes an endless amounts of calls and bugging them, and like, this is a life-threatening emergency. This is what happened. The woman was discouraged, which oftentimes we are as tenants, and so she just gave up. Well, 3 weeks later, the baby ended up in the hospital. Because that skin infection on a small organism, in other words, a baby under, you know, anything under 5 years old is extremely sensitive, right? And what was happening is they were getting basically poisoned by this fungi. They started throwing up, which is interestingly what happened to me after I left the poor people housing that was killing our family. I ended up homeless after that. I couldn't stop throwing up. So there's this violent reaction that your body has to reject the fungi. It's frightening. Anyway, so she ended up becoming homeless, right? What else is she going to do? But this is what you can do. First of all, you send a letter. Do not phone call these scam lords, because they don't give an ish about that, okay? You send a letter that is written, preferably on old school paper, like this. Remember this? Paper. And on it, you actually write the date at the top. You write your name, the address of the landlord, and then you do a thing called CC, or blind copying. And you copy other people, like the mayor's office on housing, like the Department of Building Improvement, like the Better Business Bureau. Basically, copy anybody on there that you can think of, not to mention corporate media.
So through email or you
No, this is a physical letter. It's a physical letter, but you do it on the actual letter. So you write CC, right? And the CC means copying these other recipients, right? In the body of the letter, you say that this letter is to notify you. These are all legal words, by the way. Please do your best to use them. And by the way, you can always email me, poormag@gmail.com. This jailhouse lawyer without a degree outside of jail is here to help you. I'm hella busy. I'm all over the place. But I always help folks who are in gentrification crisis because my outside of jail specialty is tenant law. Why? Because I've been evicted 22 times and houseless for most of my life. So yeah, I know the court system that predates upon me and my family and my community. That said, in the body of the letter, this letter is to notify you that my unit at, and then you put the address, is contaminated with a deadly fungi. And that's the word you use, or a dangerous fungi. You don't even need to get into specifically what it is. It's called black mold, this or that. There's different forms. This letter is also to notify you that I can no longer stay in the unit, and I, as per our agreement, need you as the landlord to pay for reasonable accommodations that are similar or better than the unit that I'm staying in now. Now, most of the time, none of these scam lords will do any of that. But what that is doing is that is citing the day upon which you left. So again, you're dating it at the top, so that you can go back if you want to, which I would highly suggest, and sue them in small claims court for the damages. It also covers you in case you're in a lease, so that they can't sue you for the termination of the lease, and that you are, in fact, and the last thing that you say, that if you do not do this, you are in breach of our legal contract as tenant and landlord. So this word breach is a legal word, and it basically is saying that they have now broken the contract, and they are, unless they do what you're asking, which is reasonable accommodation in a habitable unit, they are actually now causing you to become homeless and to go into debt or expense just to house yourself and your child. Now, in the case of this particular situation, if you have a minor child or an elder, you also state that in the letter because that is another liability. You also, if you've sought medical attention, which in this case they did, you also state that. These are all things that you need to document. Send that certified mail, return receipt requested, to the landlord. The other thing you do is at the same time you email that, and at the same time if you text this person or call them, you let them know that you sent them a legal notice of their breach of contract. After all of that, they'll probably do absolutely nothing. But again, I repeat, you have the right to go to small claims court and sue them for up to $12,000 in damages. And damages can mean anything from missing work, from the cost that you had to expend to go to the doctor, the emergency room, for child care, for your baby, for sheets and blankets and pillows that you have to rebuy because guess what? Most of your stuff is contaminated. For the clothes you had to throw away, for the food that you couldn't keep, on and on the list goes. Also, you have to wash everything. When you leave that place, you have to go to the laundromat and wash every single thing that you can wash that's cotton or wool or fabric. And everything that isn't, sadly, things like leather, things sometimes like shoes, you have to throw them away because fungi contaminates everything. And if it remains on any of your products, your home accessories, your life, it will grow again. So that is my gentrification report for today.
So, yes, KEXP 96.1 FM, right here in Poor Magazine Studio, East Oakland. So what are we going to do now?
Well, we're going to talk about today in the sweeps.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the sweeps and what Poor Magazine was in City Hall, San Francisco, with the school and everything. So let's talk about it.
So first of all, it takes a village to fight Shitty Hall. That said, we're going to... No, it's on my
No, I know. I
Facebook.
gotta turn on the music.
That said, we're going to look at a little bit of the live feed from today's action. And while we're pulling that up, I just want to break down what is a sweep. How have we wrapped our mouth, minds, and hearts around the notion of sweeping humans? And how is that even possible? That is, in fact, a normal part of life. And I specifically want to, but I want to show a little bit of this video, so we're going to watch today's broadcast.
And we have a bunch of overseers. I was violently attacked at the Navigation Center. Jeff Kaczynski, Scott Walton, they pretty much refuse and obstruct the standards of care, the grievance policies, and all of these policies that we fought for. San Francisco Administrative Code 2400, they have obstructed, blocked any type of oversight of the navigation centers. So, if the staff at the navigation centers want to flip that navigation center into a house of debauchery,
Okay. So,
and
just stop it for
basically we have a bunch of overseers.
So, first of all, what you're seeing is a die-in. These sweeps are deadly. So when we talk about sweeping humans, we're talking about the campaign to get rid of unhoused bodies, which happens in Oakland, which just happened in Lake Merritt 2 weeks ago. Constant onslaught of unhoused people's lives and homes, which happens every day, literally, sometimes twice a day in San Francisco. And which happens, of course, now as we just hold in our hearts and minds and souls our brothers and sisters in Berkeley, who were the politricksters there, just voted on a ban, if you can ban humans from sleeping in their car in Berkeley. So these are all under the rubric of sweeping human beings like we are trash. And what that causes is that causes people to die. Because if you're already medically fragile, if you're already dealing with disabilities, if you're already tired or sick, an elder, which a lot of people on the street are, being removed, having your enclosure taken, your tent taken, your belongings thrown away, and your own body removed, is the final straw. So it was a powerful action today because Reggie, who's one of the folks who work with Hold It, and the folks who work at Hospitality House, and shout out to Sister Mama Junebug, had a 3-page list of folks who've died in the streets in San Francisco alone. As well, most of you listeners and viewers know that we released our research findings not once but twice since Mayor London Breed has been in office. 405 tents reported stolen from 200 people. But I just want to ask you, Leroy, to kind of break down from the Crip Hop Nation and from a perspective of disabled scholar, what sweeping a human being means when you're already dealing with a disability, which most of our folks on the street are, as we found.
Yeah, sweeping means that you lose everything. I saw people lose their walkers, so they can't even walk. And so people lose their wheelchairs. And that goes against, forget about the ADA, it goes against city access laws. So the city is breaking their own laws when they do that, squeezing means that you have nowhere to go as a person with a disability. Like you're stuck right there, you know. So yeah.
Exactly. And as you've heard from Poor Magazine, we've done a project called Roofless Radio. That's ROOF, Less Radio. The crazy part about today was that several of the Roofless Radio researchers were in the audience. And so just to break down again what was going on, we had the die-in in front of San Francisco City Hall, right? But one of the crucial parts about that is that a supervisor named Matt Haney called the hearing on the sweeps that are happening in this rainy, freezing, cold weather. And how not only is it causing people to lose their homes, their enclosures, because if you're on the street, your tent is your home. But it's literally causing people to either end up in the emergency room or die. And anyway, it was you can imagine, an ish show of politics BS. They had the police officer coming up there and saying what they did. They had the non-profiteers coming up and saying what they do. And they had the government offices, the DPWs and the ever saying what they do. And taking absolutely no accountability. And also doing droning on in this monotone. It was almost like a sci-fi horror movie. We spoke with Memphis, one of our Roofless Radio reporters, and they were like, "This is an insult, actually. This hearing is an insult." And this is Memphis, who just had his tent taken yesterday again. Yeah. So all that to say, what you just heard, by the way, was our brother Charles Pitts, and I want to shout out to him because one of the only things that the city comes up with is building more navigation centers. Navigation centers are not at all an answer, okay? Not only are they not an answer, but they don't navigate-ish. I don't know what they're navigating. They're navigating you into more homelessness. And so, real talk, as usual, what we're saying is, first of all, no matter how many times you sweep me, trust me, or arrest me, it doesn't give me a home. That part, right? And similarly, as we say in the Poverty Scholarship book, no matter how many times you study me, it doesn't give me a home. Stop coming up with your solutions that never worked. Start listening to the ones we've always been using and working. And that's what we're reporting to you live and direct from Homefulness right now as we speak, a homeless people's solution to homelessness. So that's it, unless you...
Yeah, and this hearing is so stupid, we can go back to Frank Jordan, to Willie Brown, to whatever. And now, I don't want to switch topics, but now Nancy Pelosi wants to study, African, African reparations. They want to study it. It's like, come on, people. So politicians have a rope of years and decades of studying something that is so obvious,
Right.
because they're doing it.
Yeah.
So stop studying and start listening to, poverty scholars.
Right. Also, just to be real, too, if people want to read more about what us poverty scholars think about a sweep, if you can scroll down a little bit on that. We just released a story called How Sweeping Humans Became the New Normal. And, I would just urge people to listen to us rather than listen to more politics. Because at the end of the day, honestly, there's absolutely nothing new under that settler colonial sun. And actually what it is, like Memphis beautifully said, is it's an insult. And I do want to go back to Charles Pitts again. He was critiquing Jeff Kaczynski, yes I did say, one of the biggest non-profiteers in Frisco, who runs, and kind of overseer of these navigation centers. who now I think works at the Department of Homelessness, whatever that is. And that doesn't sound like a Kafka-esque, department. But essentially doesn't, again, have any kind of leadership or ownership for poor people. Instead, it's just this more of this settler colonizer, we throwing down a crumb, sympathing instead of empathing, lie that we have the answer, you don't, even though we haven't ever, as my Mama D would say, missed a meal.
Yeah, and once again, the answers are going against their own city laws.
Exactly.
So once, when the UN came to San Francisco and talked to providers, so it's like, why don't you talk to the government because they're going against their own laws?
So we're out.
We're out. KEXU 96.1 FM. Stay tuned for Crip Hot Nation and more programs.